The silence in the Galactic Council chambers was deafening. Ambassador Zethkaler of the Vorthak Empire shifted uncomfortably in his crystalline seat, his four eyes darting between the holographic displays showing the smoking remains of New Eden Colony. The images were burned into every delegate's memory now. Twisted metal where a school once stood, small bodies scattered among the debris like broken dolls. Explain this. The words came from Admiral Sarah Chun, humanity's representative, standing at the center of the circular chamber. Her voice carried the kind of quiet fury that made veteran warriors step back. Around her, delegates from 47 different species maintained their silence, but their biosignatures betrayed them. Fear, guilt, shame. The Galactic Council had existed for over 3,000 years, built on a foundation of laws that had kept peace among the stars. The first law, carved into the obsidian walls of this very chamber in 47 languages, was simple: never harm the young of any species, for they are the future of all civilizations. It had been written after the Burning Wars, when entire species had been driven to extinction through the systematic targeting of their children. Humans had joined the Council only 50 years ago, still considered newcomers despite their rapid technological advancement and surprising diplomatic skills. They had embraced the first law with an enthusiasm that had impressed even the eldest species. Human colonies often served as neutral zones for interspecies negotiations, and their schools welcomed children from dozens of different worlds. New Eden had been one such colony, a peaceful world on the edge of consortium space, home to 20,000 humans and nearly 5,000 alien children whose parents worked in the nearby mining systems or diplomatic outposts. The school that had been destroyed housed over 800 young minds from 32 different species, all learning together under humanity's patient guidance. Now those children were dead, and the galaxy held its breath. The initial reports suggested a mechanical failure, ventured Counselor Thicksamra, her insectoid features twitching with nervous energy. The reactor that powered the colony's shields experienced a catastrophic don't. Admiral Chin's voice cut through the explanation like a blade. We both know what those scorch marks really mean. Energy weapons. Military grade. Fired from orbit. She gestured, and the holographic display zoomed in on the melted crater where the playground had been. This was no accident. The truth hung heavy in the recycled air of the chamber. Someone had deliberately targeted a school full of children. Someone had broken the first law. High Arbiter Velnorath, ancient leader, specifically, the ones that were supposedly conducting training exercises in the outer system when the colony died. A collective intake of breath rippled through the chamber. The hegemony of Korash was one of the Council's founding members, a proud warrior culture that had been instrumental in establishing the very laws they now stood accused of breaking. Their representative, General Korashvel, remained motionless in his seat, his reptilian features unreadable behind his ceremonial battle mask. Accusations require proof beyond speculation. General Korashvel finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned through countless battles. The hegemony has honored the first law for over 2,000 years. We would never, then, explain this. Chin's tablet sent new data to the chamber's main display. Communication logs from your fleet, recovered from New Eden's orbital monitoring station before it was also destroyed. The recording began to play, translated into the chamber's common tongue. Target confirmed. Educational facility showing multiple young biosignatures. Proceeding with bombardment. Acknowledged. Remember, make it look like reactor failure. No survivors to report otherwise. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages, some leaping from their seats in outrage, others demanding immediate action. Through it all, Admiral Chun stood silent at the chamber's center, her eyes fixed on General Korashvel's masked face. High Arbiter Velnorath's voice boomed across the chaos, enhanced by the chamber's amplification systems. Order. I will have order in this chamber. The shouting gradually died down, but the tension remained thick enough to cut with a blade. These recordings could be fabricated, General Korashvel said, but his voice lacked conviction. Human technology is advanced enough to know. The voice came from an unexpected source. Counselor Yithnara of the Synthesis Collective, one of the galaxy's most advanced technological civilizations, had been analyzing the data in real time. The quantum signatures are authentic. The encryption patterns match hegemony military protocols. This recording is genuine. The silence that followed was profound. In 3,000 years of Council history, no member species had ever been proven to have violated the first law. The very foundation of galactic civilization was cracking beneath their feet. Admiral Chen finally moved, walking slowly toward General Karashvel's section of the chamber. Her footsteps echoed in the silence, each one seeming to measure out the gravity of the moment. 800 children, she said quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the absolute silence. 32 species, some as young as 6 years old in human terms. They were in their classrooms when your ships opened fire. Do you know what the survivors reported before they died from their injuries? General Karashvel said nothing. They reported that the children were singing. Chun continued. A song they'd been practicing for the Harvest Festival. A celebration that was supposed to honor the friendship between all our species. The human children were teaching the others the words in their own languages. A Thraxian boy was helping a human girl pronounce the clicking sounds correctly. A Vorthan youngling was showing everyone how to make the traditional hand gestures. Her voice never rose above a conversational tone, but each word hit like a physical blow. Your people murdered children who were singing songs of friendship between our species. Children who trusted the galaxy's protection under the first law. Children who died believing that law meant something. General Karashvel finally stood, his massive frame towering over most other delegates. The hegemony does not target children, he said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. If this action was taken, it was not sanctioned by our government. Really, Chen's tablet projected another set of data. Because this suggests otherwise. Communication traffic between the fleet and hegemony high command, routed through 17 different relay stations to hide the source. Orders originating from the Hegemony Council of War itself. The evidence was overwhelming. The hegemony hadn't just broken the first law. They had planned it, executed it with military precision, and tried to cover it up. The question that now hung over the chamber was simple. What happened next? High Arbiter Velnoritha's crystalline form seemed to dim as he processed the implications. If this evidence is accurate, he said slowly, then we face an unprecedented situation. The first law has been broken by a founding member of this council. The sanctions for such a violation are... He didn't finish the sentence. Everyone in the chamber knew the sanctions. Expulsion from the council. Economic isolation. Complete cutting of diplomatic ties. For a species like the hegemony, which had built their entire civilization on military contracts and alliance networks, it would be devastating. But would it be enough? Admiral Chun turned to address the chamber as a whole. The evidence is clear. The hegemony of Korash has violated the most sacred law of galactic civilization. They have murdered children under our protection, then lied about it to this council. The question now is simple. What is the value of a law that has no teeth? Murmurs began to ripple through the chamber again, but Chun raised her hand for silence. Humanity has a proposal. The chamber fell silent once more. What humanity might demand in response to such an atrocity was anyone's guess. But, given their reputation for unpredictable problem-solving, it was sure to be interesting. Before I present our proposal, Chun continued, I want every delegate in this chamber to understand something about humanity. We are a young species, yes. We've only been part of this galactic community for 50 years. But, in that time, we've learned something important about civilizations and the laws that bind them. She paused, letting her words sink in. Laws without enforcement are just suggestions, and suggestions don't protect children. The implications of her words sent a chill through the chamber. Humanity was known for many things: their adaptability, their innovation, their unsettling tendency to find solutions that no one else had considered. They were also known for their protective instincts, especially when it came to their young. But these hadn't been just human children who died on New Eden. Our proposal is this, Chen said, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the chamber. The hegemony will face the standard sanctions for violating the first law. But, more importantly, this council will establish the means to ensure such a violation never happens again. And what means would those be? Asked Counselor Thick Samra, though her tone suggested she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Admiral Chen smiled. And Somehow that expression was more unsettling than her anger had been. Humanity requests permission to establish the Guardian Fleet, a joint military force dedicated to the protection of children throughout Council space, with the authority to respond to any threat against the young of any species. The chamber exploded again, but this time the shouting had a different quality. Fear, yes, but also something else. Hope, perhaps. Or maybe just recognition that the galaxy had changed in the space of a single conversation. Through the chaos, General Karashvel's voice cut clear and strong. The hegemony will never accept human military oversight of our territories. Admiral Chun turned to face him directly. General, she said quietly, I don't think you understand. This isn't a request we're making just of you. This is a request we're making of the entire Council. And, if the Council agrees, the hegemony's acceptance becomes irrelevant. The vote, when it came, was swift and decisive. 46 species voted in favor of establishing the Guardian Fleet. Only one voted against. The hegemony of Karash. As the Council session ended and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Admiral Chun remained standing at the center of the floor, watching the holographic displays that still showed the ruins of New Eden Colony. The investigation was complete, the votes were cast, and justice would be served. But 800 children were still dead, and no amount of justice would bring them back. High Arbiter Velnorath approached her, his ancient footsteps echoing in the now empty chamber. Admiral, he said softly, I hope you understand what you've just set in motion. A human-led military force with Council authority. There are those who will see this as humanity positioning itself for greater power in galactic affairs. Chun turned to face the ancient leader, her expression weary but determined. Arbiter, she replied, there are 800 graves on New Eden that say some things are more important than politics. The Arbiter considered this for a long moment. Indeed, he said finally, though I suspect the hegemony will not accept this outcome quietly. No, Admiral Chun agreed, gathering her materials and preparing to leave. I don't suspect they will. As she walked toward the chamber's exit, her footsteps echoing in the vast space, the holographic displays finally went dark. But the memory of what had been done, and what was about to be done in response, would burn bright in galactic memory for generations to come. The first law had been broken. Now humanity intended to make sure it never would be again. Outside the Council chambers, the stars continued to shine with cold, distant light, unaware that the galaxy had just taken its first step toward a very different kind of peace. One that would be enforced not just by treaties and good intentions, but by those willing to fight for the innocent. The age of the Guardian Fleet was about to begin. 6 months after the Guardian Fleet's establishment, Captain Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the UES Protector, humanity's first ship designed specifically for child protection operations. The vessel was a marvel of cooperative engineering, human innovation combined with Thraxian defensive systems, Vorthan sensor arrays, and power cores built by the Synthesis Collective. It represented something new in galactic history, a warship built not for conquest, but for protection. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Zura Okafor called from the sensor station. We're receiving a priority distress signal from the Kepler mining station in the hegemony border zone. Webb turned from his contemplation of the stars beyond the view screen. What's the nature of the distress? Unknown attackers targeting the station's educational facility. Multiple species of children aboard, approximately 400 souls. Okafor's voice carried the urgency that had become standard aboard Guardian Fleet vessels. The station's defenses are failing. The irony wasn't lost on Webb. The first major test of the Guardian Fleet was coming from hegemony space, the very territory whose government had protested most vehemently against the fleet's creation. Since the New Eden incident, relations between the hegemony and the rest of the Council had deteriorated rapidly. Economic sanctions had crippled their military shipbuilding industry, and diplomatic isolation had left them scrambling to maintain their territorial integrity. Time to intercept? Webb asked, already knowing they were probably too far away to help. 18 hours at maximum warp, reported the navigation officer, Ensign Tvara, a young Volthian whose species had lost an entire generation to the burning war centuries ago. Too long. Far too long. Captain, Communications Officer Rodriguez called out, I'm reading multiple Guardian fleet ships converging on the Kepler system. The Vindication under Captain Sarah, 7 of the Collective, the Storm's Eye with Captain Gorth commanding, and the Harmony with Captain Velshawn aboard. Webb nodded grimly. The Guardian fleet had been designed with rapid response in mind. Unlike traditional military structures that relied on single massive vessels, the fleet used smaller, faster ships positioned throughout Council space. The idea was that at least one Guardian vessel should be able to reach any threatened facility within 4 hours. "Get me Captain Sarah, 7 on the fleet channel," Webb ordered. The main screen shimmered, then split to show 3 faces. The crystalline android features of Captain Sarah, 7, the rocky visage of Captain Gorth, a Thuralian whose species valued children above all else, and the elegant reptilian features of Captain Velshawn from the Seraphim Empire. "Status report," Webb requested without preamble. "The Storm's Eye is 3 hours out," Captain Gorth rumbled, his voice carrying the grinding sound of shifting stone. "Unknown attackers, possibly pirates, have disabled the station's main defenses. They're demanding the children be handed over." "For what purpose?" asked Captain Velshawn, her serpentine neck coiling with agitation. "Unknown," replied Captain Sarah, 7, her artificial voice somehow managing to convey deep concern. "But my analysis suggests this is not a typical piracy operation. The attackers bypassed valuable mining equipment and supply depots to target the school directly." Webb felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. "It's a test," he said quietly. "Someone wants to see how we'll respond." The implications were staggering. If pirates, or worse, if the hegemony itself, was testing the Guardian fleet's resolve and capabilities, then the New Eden massacre might have been just the beginning. "Captain Gorth," Webb said decisively, "you're the closest. Proceed to Kepler Station immediately. Rules of engagement are simple. Protect the children at all costs. The rest of us will provide support as soon as we arrive." "Understood," Gorth replied. "The Storm's Eye will not fail in this duty." As the connection closed, Webb turned to his crew. These were volunteers from across human space and beyond, united by a single purpose: ensuring that no more children would die as those on New Eden had died. The roster read like a who's who of galactic military service, former officers from a dozen different fleets, all drawn by humanity's promise to make the galaxy's first law mean something again. "All hands, this is the captain," Webb announced over the ship's intercom. "We are responding to an attack on children in the Kepler system. This is why the Guardian fleet exists. This is why we carry these weapons and wear these uniforms. Make sure our engines give everything they have. Those children are counting on us." 3 hours later, Captain Gorth's massive form stood on the bridge of the Storm's Eye as his ship dropped out of warp at the edge of the Kepler system. What he saw made his rocky features harden with anger. The mining station hung in space like a wounded animal, its hull breached in multiple places, atmosphere venting from the damage. But the station's school module remained intact, protected by emergency shields that were rapidly failing. Surrounding the station were 6 ships of unfamiliar design, sleek, predatory vessels that bore no markings or identification. "Hail the attacking vessels," Gorth ordered, his voice carrying the patience of stone and the fury of a landslide. The response came immediately. A face appeared on the screen, humanoid, but clearly altered by genetic modification or cybernetic enhancement. The eyes held an intelligence that was both cunning and utterly without mercy. "This is Captain Ravek of the Free Merchants," the figure said with a smile that didn't reach those cold eyes. "You are interfering with a legitimate salvage operation." "This is Captain Gorth of the Guardian fleet vessel Storm's Eye," Gorth replied, his words measured and deliberate. "You are attacking a facility containing children in violation of the galaxy's first law. Withdraw immediately." Ravek's smile widened. "The Guardian fleet," he said with mock respect. "We've heard so much about you. Tell me, Captain, exactly how do you plan to make us withdraw? You're one ship against 6. And even if you win, how many children will die in the crossfire?" It was the classic pirate gambit. Hide behind the very innocents you were threatening. Most military commanders would be forced to negotiate, to try to find a solution that didn't risk civilian casualties. But the Guardian fleet wasn't most militaries. "Computer," Goth said calmly, Implement Guardian Protocol 7. Across the ship, automated systems activated. The storms I had been designed with one primary mission: protect children at all costs. Every system, every weapon, every defensive measure had been engineered with that purpose in mind. Captain Ravek, Gorth continued, you have 10 seconds to begin withdrawing from this system. If you do not, we will consider you an active threat to the children under our protection, and we will respond accordingly. You're bluffing, Ravek said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. You can't risk 5 seconds, Gorth interrupted. On his tactical display, targeting solutions began appearing. The Storm's Eyes weapons were unlike anything else in space. Precision instruments designed to eliminate threats while minimizing collateral damage. Where traditional military thinking called for massive firepower to overwhelm an enemy, Guardian Fleet doctrine emphasized surgical strikes that neutralized threats without endangering innocence. Time's up, Gorth said simply. What happened next became legend throughout the galaxy. The Storm's Eye didn't fire a single conventional weapon. Instead, it deployed something new: quantum displacement torpedoes that didn't explode, but rather transported their targets into empty space, leaving them stranded but alive. Within 30 seconds, all 6 attacking ships found themselves floating powerlessly in the void, their crews confused but unharmed. This is impossible. Ravek's voice came through the communications channel, now filled with genuine fear. How did you, Captain Ravek? Gorth said with the patience of mountains. You are now disabled in interstellar space. We have transmitted your coordinates to the nearest Council patrol. I suggest you use the time before they arrive to consider your life choices. As the Storm's Eye moved toward the mining station to begin rescue operations, Gorth allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The Guardian Fleet's first real test had been passed with flying colors. No children had been harmed, the attackers had been neutralized, and the galaxy's first law had been upheld. But even as his crews began the delicate work of evacuating the damaged station, Gorth couldn't shake the feeling that this had been just the beginning. Someone had orchestrated this attack, someone who wanted to test the Guardian Fleet's capabilities and resolve. By the time the US Protector arrived in the Kepler system, the immediate crisis was over. Captain Webb found himself looking at the rescue operation with a mixture of pride and unease. His crew had performed flawlessly, the new Guardian Fleet technologies had worked exactly as designed, and 400 children were safe. But the investigation into who had hired Ravek's mercenaries was already raising disturbing questions. Captain Webb, Captain Sarah Seven's voice came through the communications channel. My analysis of the mercenary vessels has revealed something troubling. These ships were equipped with weapons specifically designed to breach educational facility shields. Someone provided them with detailed intelligence about Council school designs. Webb nodded grimly. He'd suspected as much. Any idea who? The quantum signatures on their weapon systems matched those found in hegemony military databases, Sarah, 7 reported. Either someone stole advanced hegemony weapons technology, or the hegemony provided these mercenaries with military-grade equipment. The implications were staggering. If the hegemony was behind this attack, if they were using mercenaries to test Guardian Fleet responses while maintaining plausible deniability, then the galaxy was facing a much larger problem than anyone had realized. There's more. Captain Velshan's voice added to the conversation. My intelligence contacts suggest this wasn't an isolated incident. There have been at least a dozen attacks on educational facilities throughout Council space in the past month, all by unknown pirates using suspiciously advanced weapons. Webb closed his eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The Guardian Fleet had been created to ensure the galaxy's first law would never be broken again. But it seemed that some parties were determined to test just how far they could push before that law pushed back. All Guardian Fleet vessels, he announced over the fleet-wide channel. We are upgrading to alert status yellow. I want full defensive positions around every educational facility in our patrol zones. If someone is testing our resolve, let's make sure they get a clear answer. As the Guardian Fleet ships moved to implement the new security measures, Webb remained on his bridge, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between worlds, someone was planning the next test of humanity's promise to protect the galaxy's children. They would find the Guardian Fleet ready. But As reports continued to come in from across Council space, attacks that were growing bolder, more sophisticated, and more targeted, Webb began to wonder if readiness would be enough. The galaxy's first law had been established to prevent the horrors of the Burning Wars, when entire species had been driven to extinction through the systematic targeting of their young. Now it seemed that someone was determined to see if that law could be broken again. And if it could, what would rise from its ashes might be something far worse than what had come before. Deep in hegemony space, in a fortress shipyard that officially didn't exist, General Karashvel stood before a massive holographic display showing Guardian Fleet ship movements throughout Council space. His aide, a younger hegemony officer with the scars of many battles, stood silently beside him. The humans have positioned themselves cleverly, the general admitted grudgingly. Their response time to the Kepler incident was impressive. Perhaps too impressive, his aide suggested carefully. Our intelligence suggested it would take them at least 6 hours to mount an effective response. They managed it in 3. Karashvel nodded slowly. The Guardian fleet is more capable than our projections indicated. That will need to be taken into account for future operations. Sir, the aide ventured, perhaps we should reconsider this course of action. The Council sanctions are already devastating our economy. If they discover our involvement in these attacks, they will not discover our involvement, the general said firmly, because there will be no evidence to discover. These mercenary groups are expendable. If they succeed, the Guardian fleet's credibility is damaged and the Council's faith in human protection wavers. If they fail, they die as pirates and rogues with no connection to the hegemony. The aide remained silent, but his discomfort was obvious. You disapprove, Karashvel observed. General, we have honored the first law for 2,000 years. Even our enemies respected us for that. What we're doing now, the general interrupted, is fighting a war for the survival of our civilization. The humans have turned the galaxy against us with their sanctimonious speeches about protecting children. They've positioned themselves as the moral arbiters of Council space. And every day our isolation grows deeper. He turned from the display to face his aide directly. The Guardian fleet is not about protecting children. It's about establishing human hegemony over the galaxy. They use the tragedy of New Eden as justification, but their true goal is to position themselves as the galaxy's policemen. If we don't stop them now, the hegemony will become a footnote in galactic history. But the children, General, the innocents who die in these attacks, are the cost of preventing a greater tragedy, Karashvel finished coldly. The humans have declared war on us using their Guardian fleet. We are simply responding in kind. As the general turned back to his tactical displays, already planning the next test of human resolve, he failed to notice the expression of quiet horror on his aide's face. The hegemony of Karash had built their civilization on the principle of honor in battle, on protecting those who could not protect themselves. Now they had become the very thing they had once sworn to fight against. The galaxy was sliding toward a new kind of war, one where the protection of innocence had become a weapon, where the highest law of civilization had become the battlefield on which that civilization's future would be decided. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Guardian fleet prepared for battles they hoped would never come, while their enemies planned battles they were sure they would win. The galaxy's first law had been broken once. Now the question was whether it could survive what was coming next.